بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We had spent a lot of time talking. Where did we reach? I think we got here. We discussed this, right? Yeah, I think we spent. And we started talking about celebrity worship.
I think so. Not the celebrity worship.
I don't think you guys were here last week.
I was.
You were, okay. This we did. This I remember we discussed. Yeah. This we discussed. Yeah, that's right. That's true. And then we spent time on this. And then we started talking about. We started talking about the situation with Wissam. And we spent a lot of time discussing that, right? I think I think we stopped at this slide. And we had talked about, okay, how do you create basically because the relationship right now between institutions and celebrities is extremely toxic. And we said, okay, well, how do we make it positive, right? Because it's important for every element that's involved in this to have to have positive feedback. How do we create that? And right now we just have two, right? We have the institution and we have the celebrity. And both of them kind of feed off each other. And does one want to stop the other? Right, they help each other, and it's not in a positive way, right? It's actually in a very negative way. So what can we do to bring balance to that relationship? What element do we have to introduce? That's probably one of the more challenging ones. So you have the institution, you have the celebrity, and I'm using the word very purposely, okay? So you have the institution, you have the celebrity. It's a very toxic, parasitic relationship. What element do I need to introduce? Sure, like those are all different barriers that we put in place for sure. But I'm saying there has to be a third element that we introduce, and what is that? Us. Right? You have to introduce the community. What are some ways that community feeds into that culture?
Praising a sheikh, or like overlooking.
Okay. Overlooking is a problem for sure. Dave, what are some other things that we had mentioned, we had spoken about? Absolutely. So, for example, if myself as a father, I see my daughter dressing up every single week to go to listen to this particular sheikh, what should I do as a father? Right? I have to step in. And stepping in, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I need to stop her immediately. But what can I do? Just check in and be like, hey, listen, I'm going to go with you this week. And if she's not averse to it, that's a great sign, right? That's a good sign. If she's resistant, then right there's something else that's going on and something I need to be worried about. It's like, okay, let me sit down, let me listen to what he has to say. And us as men, when we sit down and we listen to other men speak and see how they interact with women, do we usually have a good gauge of that person? Right, there's a reason that women have walis and guardians, right? Because men see things in men that women won't see, and women see things in women that men don't see, right? It makes sense. And immediately, if men see, like, this guy's talking a little bit too smooth, right? He's getting a little bit too comfortable, right? These are things that we'll notice, but maybe the other gender won't necessarily notice those things. It's like, no, that's not how, men talk, or that's not how men normally deal with that, right? And these are things that are important to be aware of. The other thing that I think is important is how do I gauge what events I'm going to attend? So as a community member, in general, what events do community members decide to attend? What is my rubric?
Is it going to teach me something? Is it useful?
That's what it should be, right? It's like, am I going to benefit from this?
Do I like the person?
Right? It's usually popularity, right? What is the easiest way for me as an individual to decide if I'm going to attend an event or not? How popular is that person? Does it, if a person is extremely popular, does it usually even matter what the topic is? It doesn't, right? The topic is like a cherry on top. Even the timings, sometimes people will make adjustments. But it's very unfortunate that in our rubric is popularity. Can popularity, or here, let me put it this way. Should popularity be part of the rubric when we decide who we're going to listen to?
It shouldn't be.
Huh?
It shouldn't, the topic should be. I mean, with us.
So, sure, so I'm saying, listen, the topic, I would say, knowing the person's qualifications, right? These
is a role too, because when he's popular, it's not for a reason. He has a knowledge.
Exactly.
I mean,
Or he has a really good presentation,
yeah, I mean,
right? Or he just happened to be in the right place at the right time. A modern phenomenon, I'm sure some of you are familiar with, the hawk to a girl. What speaking ability and presentation does she have?
I mean,
You understand? You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, even if you have, like, this girl was asked a question, she made like an inappropriate response, and she became like super viral and popular. She has her own podcast now. She's being invited to like the major speaker circuit. I'm sorry, huh?
I'm a little lost.
No, you're fine. No, alhamdulillah. Listen, if you're lost, alhamdulillah.
in the beginning, I thought you were talking about other celebrities.
No.
So now I'm understanding celebrities like community leaders.
They can be, right? So they're definitely community leaders.
People who are well known in the Muslim community. Not a
Absolutely.
celebrity
No. So I'm saying within the Muslim community, we're talking about. But even outside that, I'm saying like there are some people, they just have this meteoric rise to status out of nowhere. And sometimes they just happen to be in the right place at the right time. Sometimes they just happen to hit the right, you know what I mean? Like they happen to be the point in the algorithm at the moment, and they just, you know what I mean? Because what happens with fame? Fame is, it actually compounds, right? It's not like a person slowly builds up to fame. Usually they hit a threshold, and then what happens?
They slow down.
Then it takes off, right? So a person might have like 100, 200 followers, but all of a sudden when they start hitting major milestones, when they get to 1,000, how hard is it to get to 10,000? It becomes a lot easier. And when you get to 10,000, 100, and then from 100 to a million, right? You start hitting those milestones a lot quicker. You start hitting them a lot faster, because when it comes to fame, it compounds. And fame and popularity can be a sign of someone's ability. It can, right? There are some people who are actually, you know what? I look at some people, I'm like, no, that person needs to be famous because of the content that they're providing and because of the accuracy of the message. And that's important, right? Because we want people to hear that. And there are some people, I just sit there, I'm like, why is this person popular, right? Like, right? Why is this person here? Like, really? You couldn't find anyone else? You know what I mean? So like, I don't think popularity is a bad part of the equation or a bad part of the rubric. It shouldn't be what?
it shouldn't send the message that that person actually.
It shouldn't be my only deciding factor, right? It's like, okay, the person is popular and he happens to be speaking on a topic that looks really interesting and maybe isn't discussed. But I think the important thing is like, okay, sometimes we have local speakers and sometimes we have local teachers. And what are the chances that he or she would be able to talk about that topic and it be a little bit more impactful because they know the community? Maybe it might not be in the same style, right? It might not be in the same method, but it's important because what is something that I can usually do with a local speaker that I can't do with a celebrity?
Ask a question.
Right, I can access, right? Access is something that's really important. Meaning, if I don't understand something, what can I do? I can stop and ask, right? I can clarify. Or even if I feel that person made a mistake or misunderstood something, what can I do? I can point it out. But when it comes to a person who's a celebrity, how easy is it to do that? How easy is it to misunderstand that person? Right? It becomes very challenging. It becomes very difficult. So someone might say, okay, well, isn't seeking knowledge a good thing? Right? Absolutely. Like there's no one here going to deny that. It's like, okay, well, if a person seeks knowledge, many times there's fame, Many times there's power. Many times there's authority that's associated with that thing. And then, but I thought seeking knowledge in of itself is. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if you guide someone to Islam, it is better for you than 10 red camels. Like, man, it's a great virtue. Like, to be able to guide people, to be able to inform them, to be able to give them spiritual enlightenment. Whoever teaches a sunnah will see the reward of those that follow it. So if I teach somebody a sunnah and that person start doing it, not only will he receive the reward, but I'll receive the reward too. So there's a lot of spiritual motivation to involve ourselves in these things and to get in this field. The problem is what? That every time the reward is great for something, what is also great? The risk, right? It's like high risk, high reward, right? That's just how it is. That yeah, you can reach the highest levels of paradise, right? You will be put, head and shoulders above others, but if your intention is flawed or skewed in any way, what's going to happen? You'll be the first people to throw it into the hellfire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. It should be said to the scholar, engage in knowledge and leave aside the desire for the admiration of people. Meaning that if a person gets into this position, their focus should be what? Ilm. It should be knowledge. It should not be? That should not be fame. Just as it is said to someone who struggles with showing off in prayer, do not stop the praying. Yeah, so he's saying here, similar to somebody who has a problem showing off in prayer, should they stop praying? No, right? He's saying keep praying, but what should you do? Keep working on your niyyah. Keep working on your intention. So he said that high risk, high reward, understand what it is that you're getting into, and understand that accountability is definitely and 100% real. And at the end of the day, you can't tell anyone to abandon knowledge. You just can't. And I've had a number of youth come to me and they're like, Sheikh, I want to seek knowledge. And I tell them, I will never discourage anyone from seeking knowledge. And I also add, listen, whatever you think seeking knowledge is, whatever you think it is, however you imagine it, it is greater than that. I promise you. But it's not easy. Just seeking it. Right? Not just the reward, just the experience. And don't get me wrong, in a worldly sense, many times it sucked. For me, and there's a lot of my peers, we've had very similar experiences. And not just that, I was in Saudi, which is one of the more affluent places to go and study. We had access to McDonald's and Hardee's, and there's some people, all they have, their staple meal is rice. Rice. White rice is their staple meal. Bread would be the staple meal. We had access to a lot of this good food, but a lot of times I didn't have the money to afford it. And it was hard. Even my personal experience is I would go to the Jamiat during the day. When I came home, I would nap for a little bit. I would get up again. I would go to an English teaching institute to teach for a couple hours that I could, so I could get some money. Then I would try to catch a class at the Haram. And this was all almost every day. Eventually my wife, she was like, okay, this is not sustainable. Something has to give. So not only is it a personal stress, there's a financial stress that's there. There's familial stress, in terms of how am I going to spend time with my wife and my kids, right? You have all these pressures that are on you. And even then, what keeps motivating you? Every time you come across something in a book, every time you learn something about a narrator, every time you understand another way to understand an ayah, every time you engage with a particular hadith, every time you find a particular ruling, every time you can read an ayah in a different way, there's a different piece of poetry that you benefit from. There are so many things that really bring that lightness to your heart. And it keeps pushing you. Your appetite becomes insatiable. Right? You just want, the more you learn, the more you want to learn. And you're just man, this is so amazing. And it really is. But it's not easy. It's hard. It's really difficult. And like I said, my experience is not alone. Ask anybody who's gone and studied overseas. And some people may be what about even locally? Even studying locally. A lot of people say, well, what's the benefit of studying overseas? I would say the benefit of studying overseas is that you don't have any social responsibilities. That is the greatest benefit. I don't have to worry about birthdays. I don't have to worry about marriages. I don't have to worry about like get-togethers. You don't have to worry about any of those things. And if I have family, I only have to worry about my wife and kids, right? That's it. I don't have to worry about, what other people want. And you know what that gives you a lot of? It gives you a lot of time. You can literally go make Eid Salah and come home. And how many of us, the moment we step out of the house on the day of Eid, we're not going to come back until like late evening? Right? That's real. So this idea, and don't get me wrong, like there's the barakah of the haram and the place and sitting with scholars, all that stuff is great. But I'm telling you, when you don't have social responsibilities, it frees up so much of your headspace and it frees up so much of your time. And it allows you and it gives you that ability to really focus and to really seek knowledge. But like I said, it's tough. It's definitely not easy. And even here, Imam Ghazali, he says something really interesting. He says that seeking knowledge knowledge itself is benign, right? It's like wealth. Is wealth by itself bad? No, it's not. And the same thing with ilm, right? Ilm by itself is it's not. Can it be harmful? Yeah, absolutely. If I use it in the wrong way. It's very similar to if I use wealth in the wrong way. That's where I'm going to be held accountable. The problem with knowledge, and even with wealth, and he'll mention it, is that there is a specific type of religious, spiritual responsibility that's associated with it that can be extremely harmful, that can be extremely damaging. So he uses the example here of the voluntary prayers and controlling one's intention. So he says that, okay, when I make these voluntary prayers, I'm scared that riya will enter that prayer. I should learn to hate that riya, and I should make that effort to hate that riya so that I can continue praying. He's like, similar is leadership, right? Just like these voluntary prayers. I should continue doing this. I should hate the riya, but it doesn't mean that I should stop seeking it. What do these things have in common? It's not necessary for me to do. Okay? I'm choosing to. And if I'm choosing to, then I have to create this positive feedback loop. Like I have to. Because what is the difference between this and this?
The first one you're doing it for the sake of Allah. The second one is...
Well, both of these you can do for the sake of Allah, right?
The other one is involving other people.
So I'm saying, even in the case of leadership, one of the people who will have shade on a day in which there's no shade except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's throne is one, the leader who is just. Right? Meaning that this person, he didn't just reach like a regular level, he reached what? He reached like a very high level. That he's being provided this shade in which nobody else gets shade. So both of these things are voluntary. Like both of these things, it's not necessary for a person to engage in these things. But he has to make that effort. Yeah.
Like in the Islamic tradition, do we not seek leadership?
Yes and no. Meaning that in leadership itself, there's a great virtue. In leadership itself, there's a great benefit. But actively seeking something depends on an individual's intention. So, if I've put myself into smaller leadership roles and I find that I don't have the ability to control that power, I don't have the moment I'm given that authority, I start abusing it, even when my parents are like, hey, listen, watch your siblings. Right? This is a great way of really seeing how we manage and control ourselves. And if it's just an issue of controlling my siblings, and I'm like, okay, everybody go to your room, and blah, blah, and it's like, whoa, what happened? Should I go now and start seeking leadership positions after seeing how I reacted in such a small capacity? That person, absolutely not. Like someone who has had that experience and they've managed people before and they haven't had issues before, for that person, yeah, I would say go for it. Because if we don't fill those positions with good people, what happens?
Someone else.
They're not just someone. It's guaranteed to be filled by someone, right? Someone. Like we need administration. We need management. We need we need authority. Like this is not, basically, society will not continue, it will not allow an empty position, right? Society will not allow it. It'll force that position to be filled. And either it's going to be filled by people who are qualified or people who are not. Yes. No, she was removed, so we're good. So over here there are Imam Ghazali, he says that there are 3 categories. He mentions them here. There are actually 4. He mentions the 4th one later. But the 3 that I think are important. The first is positions of authority. The second are fasting, prayer, hajj, and jihad. And he says the third, this is the intermediate.
What is categories?
So these are the categories of the...
People that are at risk of...
Exactly, yeah, the people who are at risk. So we said over here, this is something that someone who is weak, he should avoid altogether. Like in this one, does it matter if I'm weak or I'm strong? No, everybody has to do these. Like, and over here, intermediate, meaning that, okay, it's not a position of leadership, but I do have a position of authority. That is something that you can judge, right? You can kind of judge, and that's something that you might be able to work on.
So I get the first and the last, the middle one. Can you explain again the second?
So if I have a tendency to show off
In prayer and fasting.
in prayer and fasting, can I stop doing those things?
No.
Right? It can't be like, oh man, like every time I pray I show off, so I'm just, you know what I mean? And somebody's like, hey, why aren't you praying? It's like, man, I have a riyah problem. It's like, wait, what? It's not. It doesn't work. Like, so basically here, this one I'm obligated to stay away. This one I'm obligated to continue. And this one I'm not obligated either way.
Okay.
Right? This is more of a judgment call. He said that if there's a possibility of falling into more faults in those positions, that is something that a lot of people and a lot of Muslims would stay away from. Saying that, historically, how many pious or righteous people sought positions of leadership? Very few, man. Very few. Even if we look at our political Muslim history, how many righteous leaders can you guys think of?
They were the first 4.
Okay, we got 4. I'm gonna, you know what? I'm feeling generous today. They're the first 4. We'll add Hassan, radiallahu anh, right? He was Khalifa for 6 months. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz.
6.
Right, we're at 6 now. Out of how many hundreds? Thousands.
Imran Khan.
Imran Khan.
Yes, that's one.
All right, the 7th golden Khalifa.
Be careful. Be careful. Are you being sarcastic? I thought this was a good plan.
But and I'm saying like because we're able to like joke about this and the scantness of such pious leaders, something for us to think about. That inherently the political space is what?
Very corrupt.
It's corrupt, man. Like in general, the political space is always like historically it's been corrupt. It's not like, oh, it became corrupt now. Right? It's always had a problem. And the first people to say something about it were the companions. So Marwan, who was one of the governors, he was getting up on the minbar. This hadith is in Abu Dawud. And I think it was Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. He grabbed his thobe, like while he was getting up on the minbar. And he's like, hey, Khabith, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm giving you the khutbah. And he was like, the khutbah is after the salah. Because he was going up for the Eid. He's like, yeah, but if I give it after salah, nobody's going to listen to me. So they had no problem challenging authority. Like, you know, when there was a time to challenge it, they would. But saying that, Marwan is very early. Like, you're talking immediately, like during the ahad of Muawiyah. So it's not like, you know, even our history and our successes, they've always been religious, always. Like people coming back to the religion, and even the situation in Gaza today. Like, yeah, if you look at it like in large scale, where are more people dying? Where's more destruction happening? Right? It's happening in Gaza. But where's the most inspiration coming from? It's coming from them, right? It's actually amazing. It's like you would imagine that people who have lost their homes and people who have no food and no water and no electricity, not even, it doesn't even look like there's going to be help coming anytime soon from anywhere. We look to them for inspiration. Right? It's actually mind-boggling if you sit and you think about it. And why is that? Is it because they have great like politicians and leaders working for them?
They already passed the test.
Right. I'm saying like, even when we look to them, we don't look at them like, man, look at their great political infrastructure. We look at them because of their spiritual resilience. Right, that's what's inspirational. And even all the bad and hardship that's happening in the world. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I guess I'll take you out of topic, but I'm just wondering, why does he emphasize leadership as a way of corrupting folks, but not like seeking wealth?
Sure. Because leadership, you have the ability, now you actually have the ability to interfere in other people's lives. Versus me being a scholar. Even if I'm the greatest scholar in the world, what is the most I can do with other people? Can I command someone?
Share your thought, your knowledge.
I can advise, right?
But I was wondering about wealth specifically.
Yeah.
Because that,
Sure.
that's a huge corrupter.
No, we'll get to wealth, inshallah. And we're gonna talk about it separately as a separate category. But I'm saying, why does he separate leadership from other positions of authority? Because leadership, I'm in a position to enforce and command people. But if I'm a judge, or if I'm like a scholar, or if I'm a khatib, or like, like any position where I have this authority, even as an imam, I have people who come in to me and be like, Sheikh, can you tell so and so to, fix this business transaction? Like, he took my money in this. What am I going to do? I can advise him. I was like, I can call him. I can ask him. And at the end of the day, he can say what? He can be like, yeah, kick rocks. People don't care. So even if you have all of these other positions of authority, like, yeah, there's authority and fame and all those things. But at the end of the day, do I have the ability to subpoena anybody and force anybody to come in? Do I have the ability to send a summons to anyone and make sure that they're making their payments, or send the police to their house? Do I have investigative power? Can I go knock on someone's door and be like, hey, show me what's going on in the house? I'll knock on the door. They'll open the door. I'll be like, hey, I need to investigate what's going on in the house. They'll be like, get off my property. Right? Like, and I'm the imam. Right? So you would say, oh, no, this person has a very high status in the community. Even with that status, I do not have the ability to enforce. I do not have the ability to command. The most I can do is advise. And this is the danger of leadership, right? Because with that leader, if he doesn't like something, what can he do? Yeah, right? Not just that, he can step on someone's property. He'd be like, let me in the house. They'd be like, get off my property. He'd be like, no, get off my property. Yeah. Right? Like, this is now mine. I have confiscated this. That is how seductive leadership is. Because you have unhinged, and this is why that person is given such a position in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because at the end of the day, what is pushing a leader to be just? His fear of Allah. That is it. That is the only thing that is going to stop him. Nothing else will stop him. Because someone might be like, oh, okay, well, what if there are other powers that are keeping him in check and blah, blah.
He's in top.
I'm saying like, okay, even if there are other powers that are keeping a person in check, are they going to prevent him from oppressing his own people? How many people even care? Nobody cares. So, these are things that are important to keep in mind, man. SubhanAllah. So he says here, the strong and the weak among the early Muslims encountered them, and they did not refrain from them for fear of faults, because the faults inherent in them were weak. Meaning that the early generations of Muslims, the one thing for sure that we do not doubt from them as a whole was their sincerity. At all. Were certain companions better than others? Absolutely. Some were more muttaqi, some were more pious, some were more upright, some were more knowledgeable. There's no doubt about that. Meaning that there were some that were less pious. There were some that were less knowledgeable. But at the end of the day, we're not in a position where we would doubt their intention, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken about them as a whole. The Prophet ﷺ has spoken about them as a whole. This doesn't mean that we can't pull out individuals, right, that are very clear examples, but as a whole, we trust them. So he mentions that when it comes to this idea of responsibility, it all balances and it all hinges on between, remember we talked about like leadership and worship kind of being on the top, and like these are the two extremes of that. And then between the two, between the two are these different levels of responsibility, whether it be a judge, whether it be an imam, whether it be a scholar, whether it be a transmitter of hadith, or whether it be a hadith scholar, whatever the case might be. And he says that the greater the faults in that person, then the greater a person needs to worry as he moves up. Because worship is both for the strong and the weak. And the leadership should be avoided by the weak. He says, as for this, this can depend on experience. And not just that, a person can change, right? A person can work on it. But if a person is intoxicated by this power, if a person is intoxicated by that authority, then that should be the first red flag that a person becomes self-aware of, so that he learns where he falls in the scale. So he can understand, will my faults be exacerbated? Will my faults be amplified? Will they be magnified, depending on where I fall here? And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and our families. Ameen. And he says, even after all this, it's still better to be cautious. So even if I have this awareness, even if I know myself, even if I know what's going on, I'm never going to lose anything in being cautious. The fourth rank, this is inshallah about money, and we'll talk about this bismillah next week. I haven't decided, are you guys going anywhere for Thanksgiving? Yes, yeah, no, maybe. Are you sending me anywhere? We're going to Ali's house? All right, alhamdulillah. Okay. Anyway, if all of you are part of the announcement group, inshallah. Yes. I'll let you guys know. But based on attendance today, doesn't seem like we'll have class next week, inshallah. So I will inshallah see you guys the week. Oh, wait, Thanksgiving isn't next week.
It is. Thursday.
What day is it? What is today's date?
The 21st.
Next week is Thanksgiving, yes. Okay. Because I'll see you the first week of December, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, wallahu a'lam, wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So, you guys have an opportunity to spend money on Thanksgiving.
What are they playing on?